Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest Tree Council webinar, especially for National Tree Week. Today, our talk is My Experience with Veteran Trees by Cormac Downey, our current president, who will share some of his personal experience and encounters with veteran trees. He'll discuss the significance of the trees and how he has managed them. And he'll have lots of pictures for us to enjoy. So, Cormac, I'll hand over to you straight away.
Thanks, Brendan. I'll just share now. Thanks, Brendan, for that. First of all, good morning, everyone, and many thanks to you all for joining. I'm going to, as Brendan said, look, I'm just going to have a very sort of informal presentation, really, and just share some of the veteran trees and other trees that I've come across in my time, and trees that I've worked on and managed. So, I suppose I'm starting off here. These are two lovely veteran trees in Santry Domain. Santry, of course, was a designed landscape at one stage, and a lot of our veteran trees are in designed landscapes. But as you see, it's kind of an island now surrounded by urbanization, which has its own kind of problems. So, what is a veteran tree? Veteran trees, they're kind of easier to recognize and hard to define, but it's a tree that shows ancient characteristics which may not just be due to age, but could result from natural damage management or the environment. So some of those characteristics I'm talking of are naturally forming waterproofs, decay holes, physical damage to the trunk, large quantity of dead wood in the canopy, sap runs, crevices in the bark, fungal fruiting bodies, epiphytic plants. And the picture here I have is of a hawthorn, not very old, but as you can see, the whole center has decayed and has been removed. So that's, even though it's quite a small and youngish type of tree, that is a veteran tree. It's a point I want to make, is that trees really theoretically don't have a fixed lifespan. We kind of need to understand this when we're dealing with trees, particularly veteran trees, that they have an indeterminate or indefinite growth pattern, but are not limited in shape, size, but are governed by their site, environmental conditions, and past management. Trees annually produce new shoots, roots, and radial increments of wood and bark through their lives. So trees, I suppose, theoretically, trees can live forever if the conditions are right. And this is one of my favorite slides. It kind of picks this lovely. It's photographic record of the same tree over 100 years, which is quite a rare thing, really. But you see in 1910, this oak already probably having some problems with roots or some damage here. And 1920, you can see that the upper crown thinning out, and the growth lower down starting to emerge. And as 1950, that upper crown is nearly gone altogether, and there's a new crown being formed underneath, and all the way to 2009. So you can see how same tree can be kind of totally transformed, but it can keep reinventing itself. And veteran trees are really not to be confused with ancient trees. Ancient trees are those that have reached a great age in comparison with others of the same species. Generally, these are small, fat, little old trees, because the crown is retrenched through age. And I'll talk about retrenchment later on. but it usually has a wide trunk compared with others of the same species, and hollowing of the trunk as well. That hollowing is a main characteristic. And just to show you an example of an ancient tree, if you can see, hopefully you can see my cursor there, but if you can see that there, that's my cap. And if I was standing beside that tree, that's where my head would be. I'm just almost 6 foot. So just to give you some sort of idea of the size of this yew tree, this is one of 3 remaining yew trees in Barradale in the Lake District in Cumbria, in England. And William Wordsworth, he wrote his famous poem, The Fraternal Four, based on, there was 4 trees here originally, now there's only 3. But this limb here that had fallen off, I think they've done a count on that, and that's almost 1,500 years old, that limb itself. And more impressive is that there's two of these trees, the tree next to this one, they have tested, and apparently they've done kind of a DNA test on it, and they are identical. So they originate from one tree. So I mean, God knows how old that actual system is. Goes back thousands of years. Really, really impressive tree. But that's an ancient tree. There are other classifications. We've got champion, ancient, heritage, veteran, and notable. And heritage and notable trees, these are trees connected with specific historic events or people, well-known landmarks in the community, and a tree with significant landscape character or architectural setting. So, notable trees, just impressive trees for where they are. This is a gill in Cumbria as well. I used to work here many years ago, and I suppose it's about the same time of year. Maybe this picture's taken a little earlier, but there is a magnolia. This massive white flower is a magnolia tree, and it's a Magnolia isca. Now, Peter Vetch, the great plantsman, and of the extra nursery fame, he crossed 2 magnolias to produce. I think he only successfully got 6 seedlings from it. One was white and one was pink, and he kept one of each. And this tree is a direct descendant of that. So that's got huge cultural significance as well as being an absolutely amazing tree. The size, the color itself, as you can see, is quite impressive. But the size of it, again, that's the stem, and I have a lot of hats, but that's where I will be standing again at 6 foot. So that's an absolutely a monstrous magnolia. It's a fantastic tree. So that's certainly a notable tree. These are 2 tulip trees, liriodendrons, that I came across on a trip once. And again, look, taking pictures of trees, it's really hard to capture the scale of these things. You really have to be there. But if you just look at the people and look at the size of these trees, which at one stage were this one here on the right possibly coppiced, but these are well in excess of 100 feet tall, absolutely monstrous, massively impressive. Again, I've put this picture in. We saw this on a trip, and this is up Northern Ireland somewhere. I put this in because this is a much maligned tree, actually. But if you look at it here, when it's let go, grow into maturity, and that's it there, and that's a Sitka spruce. So it's just to, so I like to throw that in just to let people see what Sitka spruce can be like. But that's again an absolutely massive tree, really impressive. And again, this is a lime tree in Grange Corman Cemetery here in Dublin, beside the Phoenix Park. I put this in because it's, if you can see there, there's actually two crowns, two separate trees. One is a silver lime and one is a common lime. The silver lime would have been grafted on the rootstock of a common lime, but that graft had come up when it was younger, and it formed its own crown along with this silver lime, and it's just visually very, very, very impressive, and very unusual. Again, this is a tree I came across. This is down in Devon, south of England. This is a cork oak, Corkstuber. Absolutely a huge, huge tree. As you can see, lots of people taking pictures of it, but again, it's really hard to capture. I couldn't get it all in the frame, but it's just goes to show what can grow here. And I think when people talk about climate change and that, you know, diverse species diversity, this is probably a tree for the future, I think. I know Devon has quite a nice kind of climate and suitable to this, but I think we possibly are going that way in time. But it is a beautiful tree, gorgeous. And we're talking about kind of heritage tree. I put this in. This is up in the Glebe up in Donegal, and if you can see the bricked up cavity. Now, this at the time, I suppose it was kind of accepted that it was an accepted way of managing cavities in trees. And I suppose it just goes to show that people, you know, had a value on trees even then, and they wanted to try and do the right thing, even though it's not really the right thing. We know that now, but it's I suppose it's a borocultural heritage. It's how trees used to be managed. But that's still there. That's quite interesting too. Veteran trees can also be a link to our past and to our culture. These are two really big plane trees in Dublin, and this is in the Garden of Remembrance on Parnell Square. And this garden used to be the garden belonging to the Rotunda, which is just to the right-hand side, the Rotunda Hospital. So these trees are kind of remnants of that garden that have been retained. So they're from an older time, an older design that have been retained in a more modern setting. So again, you know, the site itself is important culturally, but the trees, you know, they carry through from the different era. Again, we have this is Arbor Hill, again culturally significant. We have, which is actually a very, very large sycamore, but a very, very impressive tree, gorgeous tree, which would have been there before the leaders of the Rising were buried there. So that would have seen a lot of history in its time. And so we should ask, why are veteran trees important? There's lots of reasons. I mean, why are trees important? And we've, you know, been talking about this for many, many years, and I think we're all familiar with why trees are important. But veteran trees in particular, landscape value. I mean, I suppose that doesn't need, it's an aesthetic. I think that's beautiful myself. You know, we don't need to explain why that's nice looking. It just is. But that's it. It's from the other side. And we have, you know, not only the aesthetic from one side, but we've got the whole heartwood decayed. There's the wood being broken down. There's habitat there, and that decomposition, you know, it feeds back into the tree that's still alive there. So there's lots going on there, but and not just, you know, not just an aesthetic value. These are two beech trees, you know, severely storm damaged. But again, this damage. When I speak about damage and defects in trees, when we're talking about veteran trees, defects are habitats. Really, that's what they are. And these have these have been veteranized, but naturally been veteranized by the wind. Huge habitat being created in the upper crowns of these trees, and that will initiate a lot of dieback and decay in the central parts of those trees, and that's really important. The habitat is hugely important. Habitat associated with veteran trees is hugely important. And in a setting like this, I think where trees can be retained in this condition, it's hugely important. And that's a view from the far side of those trees. And I think that's they're just around here. Again, just to feed into the aesthetic, visually, I think it's very, have a dead tree standing in this setting, very appropriate. Damaged trees in the setting, also very appropriate. This veteran willow, very natural setting. And you can see how it at one stage had fallen over, taken roots, kind of a phoenix regrowth up here that has since failed and fallen into the water. And again, this is, just massive habitat here. It's fantastic. We've got heartwood decay. We've got submerged wood, which is a habitat in itself. We've got half submerged wood, which is also another kind of niche habitat for all sorts of waterborne insects. And it's a lovely picture. It's got everything going on. I think this is a gorgeous old sweet chestnut in that's in Castletown House. And you can see in the center of this tree, there's an awful lot of dead or dysfunctional wood. But again, this dead wood, and that's an awful term, really, dead wood, because it's not actually dead. It's probably more alive now than it was when it was alive, because the habitat that it supports, all the saprozoic invertebrates, insects, birds, shelter, everything, and there's we really wanted to try to retain this. So I mean, a prop, as you see here on the right hand side, has been installed to try and keep that aerial deadwood retained. We have mulch put around the base of the tree to help with compaction. There's a lot of management going on there, even though it's maybe not that obvious. That's quite a nice tree if you're in Castletown to have a look at. And another sycamore. Sycamores, especially when they're older and mature, they make fantastic trees. I think they're visually very, very impressive. This is in Farmley, and this is a tree. Everyone that parks in the main car park will pass this tree. It's a gorgeous tree, and plenty of habitat, plenty of holes here, and there will be decay in the center of that tree as well. And you've got lots of birds nesting in this tree. But again, it's again aesthetically very, very pleasing. This is a Taxodium distichum, a swamp cypress I came across on a trip when I was in Devon. Biggest one I've ever seen. But again, it's that in itself is of interest. But for me, you see this picture on the right hand side, you've got a steel rod and a plate that was installed many, many years ago, and that was to manage. There's a kind of a very compressed codominant stem on this tree, and it's quite low down in relation to the size of the tree. So in order to manage the potential of that failing or those two limbs splitting out, they installed this rigid brace, which seems to have worked to date. So again, very, very impressive tree. As I said, I haven't seen one as big as that. So veteran trees, as I touched on, really they're living ecosystems above and below ground. They're rare and getting more rare, unfortunately. And with that, are we losing genetic information, genetic resources? this oak on the left-hand side, you know, it's the timber production. If you look at it even from a timber production point of view, is there something there that can be maybe you know, progress into producing stems with this volume size of timber. And of course, this is actually an amazing tree. The one on the right hand side is an ash, absolutely huge. Again, I had to stand very far away to try and get most of it in. But if you see the size of the people at the base of that trunk, it'll just give you some indication of how big it is. But again, with ash dieback on the rise, you know, what genetic information has this tree? Because it itself is quite old, but it has come from trees before it, of course, and that genetic information would have been passed on. So does that hold some secret to maybe, you know, living with ash dieback? Is it able to show a bit of tolerance? So old trees like this, very important to keep an eye on, especially in regard to ash dieback, to see how it does react. But maybe it is a resource. It's a genetic resource that you know, goes way back in time. I think it's really, really important. Yeah, we as I touched on, we don't have, I suppose, we're running a room, aren't we? Room is at a premium, space is at a premium now, especially in urban areas. But so which is why our parklands and you know, I work for Fingal County Council at the moment, and they've got some fantastic parklands and domains, and they have, you know, and it's in these areas that we have the room to keep big trees. That's really important. Because there's less and less of these bigger trees left. And we need a good diverse age range as well. So as you can see in this picture, there's a lot of young trees coming up, you know, around these old trees. So that's, you know, the kind of thing we'd like to get at. It's kind of missing an in between, actually, kind of a semi-mature, bit older age of a tree that will eventually become that veteranized tree. But that's the kind of thing really we need to be trying to get towards. Yeah, habitat. It's sort of kind of obvious in a way. They provide great nesting habitat, hiding, feeding for vertebrates and invertebrates. Really niche habitats, decaying dead wood, and that kind of habitat is as I say, getting quite rare, because if we run out of those older trees, they don't get a chance to decay. That hardwood doesn't get a chance to decay, which in itself is a really, really specialized environment. And certain specialized insect larvae need wood in that advanced state of decay to feed on. So that's really specialized sort of habitat. And so the less older veteran trees we have, the less habitat for those specialized insects. So, and you know, 11% of the European saprozoic beetles are threatened, which is apparently the most threatened species community in Europe. So it's just to hit home the value, the importance of this kind of habitat, and of course protected species. And again, all these defects are habitat. I mean, this hazard beam, that's ideal kind of place for bats to roost even. So all these, as I said, all these defects are potential habitat. We have these are two. This tree on the left would have been, it had been struck by lightning, which opens up that central hardwood to decay. So again, now the tree is doing fine, fantastic crown on it, but the habitat that lightning strike has produced is fantastic, and as I said, quite rare. And again, this tree over here, again, the hardwood is exposed, and the tree is doing fine. even structurally, the tree's doing okay. But again, it's got that specialized habitat. We have these plants living on older trees. We've got kind of epiphytic plants, these ferns, polypodium. I think that is growing on. I think that's an old pear tree actually. But again, these are niche habitats. Loberia pulmonaria, which is a kind of a quite rare lichen, is dependent on the unshaded side of older trees, particularly ash. So I mean that's quite specific, and that's a niche sort of habitat. So so that's kind of providing for a very rare lichen, and now especially with the ash dieback, you can see those habitats disappearing or really quickly. Yeah, this is when I saw these in Cumbria. These are what they call air trees, and these would have been this is a sorbus living on piggybacking on an oak. And Cumbria is a very wet area. This oak moss covered, so there was always moisture there. A bird would have left a seed in that, and it would have sprouted. And as I said, loads of moisture there, and it dropped the roots all the way down, and has established roots in the ground of its own. And it's just, as I say, just piggybacking on that tree. Decaying wood. When we're talking about veteran trees, this is a huge part of veteran trees, and this dead wood again. It's a bit of I suppose it's a negative term. There's an very old sweet chestnut with a lot of dead wood in it, but the center of that tree is totally decayed. Again, fantastic habitat, and again, the tree has, is living alongside it. There's a great crown on that tree, very vigorous root systems all there, but again, plenty of dead wood. This sweet chestnut, this is in the park again, and the tree is dead. Huge amount of dead wood habitat here, but it's where it is within this copse, away from high usage areas. This can be retained, and it's really important that these habitats are retained. This is an old fallen tree this is in Derrynan, I think, down in Kerry, and again, visually it's quite attractive, I think. And this tree will eventually just melt back into the landscape, and I think they've done a really good job here to to retain that piece of deadwood. It's quite fitting, I think. This again, just a picture just demonstrating how fungi can get access into the central core of the main stem. There's a large wound on a limb, which, as you can see, is starting to decay, and there will be certain fungi that are specialized and that can live on that in those conditions, and will get into the central core of that tree, and heartwood decay will commence. So that tree is getting towards the veteran stage. And the deadwood, there's a tree that I think this is in the Phoenix Park, but this tree had to come down because there's quite a busy. It was dead, very brittle. It's beech tree, and beside a very heavily used path. So it had to come down, but it was retained on the ground for deadwood habitat. And if you can see the little sorbus growing up in between it, so it just goes to show it's a very natural thing here, that there's a lot of deers in this area, and this tree wouldn't have a chance if it wasn't for this lying deadwood. So it's a little nursery here. I think that's just a lovely picture. Sap runs as well, provided slime fluxes. As you can see, these wasps here are loving it. It was a gorgeous smell of beer off this. It was alcohol basically, which is why even the slugs are getting in on it. But it's fantastic. There, I mean, there's your insects there. Being supported by the tree. That's obviously this flux has been caused by some sort of wounding inside. But again, these defects are habitat, and nothing. I think that shows it perfectly. Plants and fungi. I'm going to talk a bit now about fungi. Really important element to trees. Never mind veteran trees, but plants and fungi have evolved together over the last 400 million years and have formed intimate relationships with each other. Fungi are an essential part of the tree's ecosystem as it breaks down dead and decaying material and as nutrient gatherers. And mycorrhizal fungi, of course, form symbiotic relationship with roots. The fungi create conditions where saprozoic invertebrates thrive, and these are the most threatened community of invertebrates in Europe. So yeah, we've got this. I love taking pictures of fungi. To be honest, this is a Fistulina hepatica, a beefsteak fungus on an old veteran oak, just starting to emerge. It's called a beefsteak, of course, because when it's fresh and if you cut it or break it, this red liquid comes out as if it was bleeding. And it's an annual one, so that it will come up every year and go and disappear and re-emerge every year. But there's an old one and a new one together, and it can produce this cubical brown rot, and that's where the cellulose is removed, but the lignin is retained for a longer period, and that creates this kind of cubical kind of shape, and that's referred to as cubical brown rot. This is the Dyer's Maze Gill Frailish Divine Itzii. Again, this is an annual one. It usually occurs mostly on conifers, and the interesting thing about this fungi is you can find this a good distance away from the tree, as it will be kind of living on with roots far out from a good distance from the main trunk. Laetoporus sulphureus, this is chicken of the woods. When this is fresh, the color is absolutely amazing. Again, this is a specialized heartwood decay. This is specialized over time to live on oak, hardwood, as well as yew. You'd see it on yew very often, because both of those trees, they're quite inhospitable. With the wood is quite inhospitable to most fungi, but these over the years they've developed and specialized in living on that wood. And this pseudo Innonotus striatus. Again, there's a couple of common names for it. One of them is the Eiffel Tower fungus, because it often decays the kind of the inner part of the tree, leaving the main buttress roots in good intact and in good condition. So you have this sort of tree on stilts, eventually on stilts, and the tree is fine, and it can even structurally is okay. It's just that the central part has totally decayed. And there's lovely. This is called guttation. These little droplets. This is how this fungal bracket kind of gets rid of excess moisture, and it through specialized glands. But it's really actually quite beautiful to look at. So when you get them at the right stage, they're really gorgeous. This is Myripilus. Again, it's this, I think, actually what they refer to as a kind of white rot, where both lignin and cellulose is degraded. Quite an impressive fruiting body. They can get massive, they get really, really big. Called a giant polypore is the common name for it. And this is, this is the spongy, this is the condition of the wood that white rot can create. This kind of really soft, spongy, wet, kind of what wood, if you like, what's left of it. So yeah, fungi are an essential component, of course, of nutrients cycling. Without fungi, we wouldn't be here actually. Really, really important. And wood, of course, is energy. All that cellulose, it's all energy. Somebody wants it to live off it. And in veteran trees, you often see, that when we'll say that heartwood is starting to decay and the fungi get involved, and they degrade and break down all the nutrients that are in the wood. It makes it available to, in fact, back to the same tree, and that as a strategy that a tree can produce aerial roots, and you see on the right hand side, one starting to develop there and starting to feed off its own nutrients, its own wood. There's that root, a close up of that root. So nothing goes to waste. So this is all part of the system. It's the nutrient cycle, and all these fungi and strategies are all built around this system. This is a lovely sweet chestnut, and again, this is the one actually I showed you earlier with the prop. And again, you'll see these aerial roots starting to form and functioning, really well. That's quite a big root there, really. So it's quite a very successful strategy, really. And I've seen them in all sorts of trees. This is an old birch tree, and there's the roots on the inside of it. Well established roots, quite amazing, really. And a beech tree, not a great picture, but if you see in there, there's lots of aerial roots have formed in there, and there's, that tree is doing quite well, but it's really, really impressive when you see it happening. This is gorgeous. This again, this is an ancient yew. I was on a trip in England, and you'll see halfway up, you get it has the hollowing happening, and then there's the roots there. Sorry, there's the aerial roots starting to form again in the center of that tree, living off all those recycled nutrients. And again, it goes back to my, one of my original points about the indeterminate kind of growth patterns. These trees can, they can reinvent themselves all the time. Quite amazing systems, really. Yeah, and other natural strategies that veteran trees have, or trees have. We have this. This is a sycamore, and this is. I will put this picture up just to demonstrate retrenchment. So we've got this kind of dieback from the top of the crown, and what the tree does start to create a crown lower down. So it kind of readdresses an imbalance somewhere, whether the roots were damaged, or there's not enough nutrients to keep that top part alive, or whatever. So it kind of readjusts itself and starts to lose the upper crown, and the energy can then be used to enhance that smaller lower inner crown, and a new tree can be formed, a bit like the cloth oak picture I showed you before, with from the 100 years of the pictorial record. So that's at that stage. It's just a good picture. Kind of, it's just had started to die back from the top. Often referred to that dead top, that stag-headed top. You see that in a lot of old oaks. And there's an old one that's retrenched all the way back. And again, you can see the crown that's there now. Really impressive. Tree is fine, physiologically really good. And you see the dead with a bit of stag-headedness, stag-headed at the top. But you can imagine, you looking at the size of that tree, how big that tree was at one stage, and over time, it has retrenched all the way down. And of course, that helps us structurally. It's very, very, very rare that any of these trees actually fail or fall over, because that whole, that extension has been brought way back down. So the center of gravity is now really low. And yet there's still a really good viable crown there. This is the picture I took, and this is a beech tree, and I think just to demonstrate, I think this is at the initial kind of really early stages of retrenchment. If you can see that very top little bit up here, it's just starting to get a little bit sparse, still alive, but getting a little bit sparse. But you can see it's really defined, that line of where the new crown is it's retrenching back to this point. I just thought that's a really good picture of it. So that's sort of at the beginning of its journey into retrenchment. This is I think probably one of the biggest sweet chestnuts that I've kind of worked with. And this was down in Emo Court, and if you're ever down there, go and check it out. It's a fantastic tree. But I've put it in just to demonstrate the strategy of this epicormic growth. Now, I think nearly all trees have the capacity for epicormic growth at some stage in their life, but it's usually in the very early stages. Some trees retain that ability way into an older stage, a bit like the sweet chestnut, and it has that capacity to create this ring of epicormic growth around its base. And I'll go back to this tree. This is the tree with the prop in Castletown, and you see these bigger limbs up here. This was smaller epicormic growth, that is now grown into larger limbs. It will eventually become bigger trees itself, but they will be slightly, a slight distance away from the main trunk. So slightly moving in the landscape, just slightly moving. And over time, these trees can keep moving very slowly, but they can walk in the landscape. It's the strategy that man has taken advantage of with coppicing. A lot of these, hazel, for example, was a great coppice tree that able to take coppicing, and sweet chestnut in the south of England. They have industries built up around this coppicing. Every 20-25 years, they would come and harvest these big long shoots for all sorts of uses. But it's that natural strategy that has provided that way of management. But it's a really successful strategy. Another strategy, this is what's referred to as a phoenix tree. This is a yew tree that's fallen over. You can see most of its root plate is up in the air, but you can also see these offshoots that suddenly have taken over and are going to, become trees in their own right eventually, and they will have root systems in there. So this, again, that's very, very impressive when you come across this kind of thing. Very, very natural. The main stem can be there. It'll be there for as long as it's there. But those uprights will now become trees in their own right. And this is my favorite one, kind of example of this. It's a great picture of a walking tree. Basically, this is a tree that has fallen over a little bit, has rooted, grown up, fallen over a little bit more, rooted, grown up. So that's, if you look at that's actually moved quite a distance from its original position. So that to me, that literally is a walking tree. Again, another strategy, this layering, this horse chestnut. Again, this layering is a strategy that we've taken advantage of in propagation. We layer plants all the time, and this, which we're just mimicking nature really. The tree that this has produced on the right hand side is as big as the mother tree really. And there's lots of trees can do this. That's quite an impressive, and it's just at a nice stage where that kind of the umbilical cord is still there, even though this tree is a tree of its own in its own right. But eventually, this umbilical cord will not be needed anymore. Will disappear, will die back, and then suddenly you'll have two separate trees. And again, this tree moving in the landscape. And here's, oak does it as well, if it's allowed to do it. Most of our trees, we like to take the lower limbs off trees all the time for whatever reason. I don't know, but we do. But if let go in a natural setting, these lower limbs will eventually slowly drop, hit the ground, and those adventitious roots will take hold, and the tree can continue on its journey. That's a beautiful tree. This is Malahide Castle. If you get a chance, go in and see that. And just to keep on that theme of strategies, this is an old lime, part of an old 18th century avenue. Now, it had lost its head many years ago, and adventitious buds have come into play, produced fruits, and now there's a new crown created on a very kind of small tree, or very low tree, if you like. But if you look around the corner of this tree, it's kind of started to separate. The central part of that tree has decayed away. It is now, with its aerial roots, you'll see down the bottom, it's started to form its own root system. So there's two distinct trees here, where there was one. And you see the aerial roots, which have really taken hold down on the bottom on that left hand stem. And here's aerial roots, just to kind of show you what they can look like. They're trying to drop them down. I don't know if these will live or not, if they'll hit anything, but this is what the tree does. And when those roots do hit soil or a good environment, then they'll take, and they can produce the root system to keep that tree going. These this is a tree. I think this is in the Phoenix Park. There's a hornbeam anyway, but you can see it's hollow. You can see right through it. You can see it's hollow. But I think it's just a good indication of these kind of separate functional units, distinct separate functional units. And this is at a stage where that's just starting. Sorry, I'll just go back to that one. What happens is if that tree does collapse, the chances are that one of these functional units will stay rooted in the ground, so that tree can continue in time. Or maybe one or two of these functional units can be retained, even though the majority of the tree will possibly, in a storm or whatever, will have failed altogether. But so instead of having, the tree starts to separate itself, and these functional units will start, establishing their own root system. So it'll be a tree in its own right. It's a very successful strategy. These are two ash in Newbridge House. These are trees, very, very old trees, and they've over time created this new kind of youngish crown here. But again, here's that kind of separate functional unit being created, and that, as I said, will establish its own kind of independent root system. So the rest of the tree, if it does fail or disappear, there will be something retained there that can then go on to grow into another tree and continue and continue. So again, we're back to that sort of indefinite. There is no lifespan on a tree potentially. So threats to veteran trees, compaction is a big one. You see around trees, people are always kind of drawn to trees when people love to park under trees. I don't know why, but people love to store stuff under trees. They just will automatically, store bags of all sorts, machinery. Everyone sticks it under a tree. I don't know why, but they do. This can have a very detrimental effect on the rooting environment. And this is the same tree. And it just goes to show the compaction. That water is sitting there. It can't percolate down through the soil because the soil has been squeezed so much that there's no room for it. And where there's no room for the water, there's no room for air. And water and air are two of the main things roots need to live. So it's really important to manage your rooting and the rooting environment. And that's just more, as I said, people love to park under trees. Diseases. There's the picture on the left, horse chestnut, with horse chestnut bleeding canker. And if you can see at the edge of, there's steams that run up that tree. And these seams, particularly in horse chestnut, kind of weaken the timber an awful lot. So horse chestnut with this disease needs a lot of management, and it can often fail, to be honest, at these points. So you're managing trees. You have to look at you're assessing the condition of these trees. All this is taken into account, and you apply your management based on that. This is a Cupressus macrocarpa. People love to climb trees as well, which is great. But we as managers, we need to manage the safety end of things. So that can be a big problem because we want people to enjoy trees, but obviously we have to manage the health and safety risk of it as well. And therein lies, that's the juggle. There's the balance, and that's where the management comes in. And just there's ways around it. I think culture is probably the biggest threat to our trees, veteran trees, or any tree, to be honest. These are two tamarisk that I came across. So I was in Biarritz, is in the south of France. Now I just love these trees. Biarritz, mad busy place, just people milling everywhere. So the usage is huge. Now there's no fences around these trees. There's nothing around them, and yet they're retained. I'm just wondering, would these be retained in Ireland? I leave you with that question. But it just goes that it's a different culture. Well, I don't think unfortunately, we don't really have a tree culture here in this country. Not like in Europe. So this is the kind of thing I think we're missing out on, unfortunately. So just to speak on the management, when undertaking management on veteran trees, my overarching aim, I suppose, where possible and appropriate, is to just keep trees alive for as long as possible, but still maintain the values that those trees offer. It should be borne in mind that the best management option sometimes is not to do anything. Which, to get to that decision stage, an assessment has to be taken, and that's really the first thing you need to do. So you assess its environment as much as the tree itself, the structural condition of the tree, its vitality, and its vitality is essential to gauge what intervention is needed and is appropriate, especially in order to gauge the tree's ability to recover successfully. So you need to know before you apply any sort of management, is the tree able to cope with what you're suggesting? Because if it's not, then you're definitely going to kill the tree, either quickly or slowly. So you really have to get to grips with what state the tree is in, and not just the tree, but the surrounding environment as well. This is in this is just outside London in Burnham Beeches, famous woodland, where they would have pollarded beech, and they would have pollarded beech for a long time in this area, and then they were left go for a long time. So there was a kind of these pollards had produced big, huge limbs, and then huge limbs started to fall apart. So I think a lot of how we manage veteran trees now has come from the people who studied and tried to manage the trees here at Burnham Beeches. And that's the great Helen Reid there in the picture. She's kind of she wrote a lot of books and has done a lot of research in along with others on veteran tree management. So sorry, if I just go back to that picture, you see, I mean, this is a very old beech tree, very hollow. So there's a risk of those heavy limbs just breaking out. So they've installed some props to keep certain limbs up, and of course the fence off just to keep people away. And that fence keeps people directly off the rooting, the main part of the rooting environment. And it stops people being a target. So, stops people, having a picnic under that tree. And yet it's close enough for people to go up and have a look at the tree and enjoy, which I think is important. Props is another form of management. Now, some people might argue that, for that tree to go naturally, let that limb fail. And maybe might be an appropriate form of management. But sometimes it may not be, and it's just an option. But it does work, and that's a huge limb, in relation to the size of that tree. And for it to fail back, particularly close to its main stem, it speeds up, I think, probably the decline of that tree. But again, it goes back to we come back to your management objectives for any particular site. So management of land surrounding trees, as I said, veteran trees is not just about the tree itself, but its surrounding environment. Really important. So we're talking about protecting the rooting environment. We're looking at a circle with a radius 15 times the diameter of the trunk. So if you want to calculate, if you want to draw a root protection area around a tree, the radius of that circle, you calculate that by 15 times the diameter of the trunk, or 5 meters beyond it. Now that's the books say that should be a minimum, and ideally, if you can, then that's what you do. But sometimes you're in areas where that just can't. You just don't have that room. Isn't there? So that's when management comes in. You have to look at the vitality of the tree and what can be done. But really, you're looking to protect as much rooting environment around that tree as you can. And it's really important to avoid sudden changes to the environment. Trees can withstand an awful lot, but as with nature, things adapt, but things adapt over time. That sudden change, that's a killer. It'll destroy anything. They just don't have the ability. They haven't evolved that way. They've evolved to adapt, but not suddenly. So when we're dealing with veteran trees, we want to avoid that sudden change, and have it spread out really. And a very simple way of managing things, as with any trees in any say public area, move the targets away from the target zone, reroute footpaths, don't have your bench underneath the tree. That causes a problem. Move the bench away from under the tree, then there's no problem. And sometimes, it's might be appropriate just to fence a whole area off. that might fit in with other site management objectives, and in that way, you can leave trees do what they do. There's no target in there at all. So, sometimes that can be appropriate. When decompaction, we're dealing with decompaction. These are trees in Old Bridge, Battle of Boyne site in the octagonal garden. If you haven't seen that, go and see it. They're kind of Tolkien-esque trees. They're absolutely fantastic. But this one was suffering from a bit of compaction. So we got some air spade, carried out some air tilling, which basically uses compressed air to dig up the soil and decompact it down to and that's really, I suppose, only effective to, we'll say, the first 10 maybe 10 inches deep. So we tried this initially, and we added in some soil improver back in with that kind of decompacted soil, and this is what we kind of ended up with. And this mulch, again, mulch can be very beneficial for lots of reasons. I mean, for the usual reasons of maintaining, regulating soil moisture, soil temperatures. So you're avoiding those extremes, which is important. Also, it helps with footfall. It helps, it helps with the compaction. It helps avoid compaction. But we put up those small kind of fences around close to the tree. Again, really to stop people climbing, because they're very climbable, these trees. So we wanted to control that, and yet, not to keep people away. So we kind of compromised and put the fence there, so people could walk up and have a look and be close to the tree, but just not in the tree. And I think that's worked pretty well. And this is an oak tree in Santry Domain. Again, and Shane Sutton and Colm and the gang in Santry have done a great job here. A very simple form of management. Fence goes up, stops people going in underneath this tree. So that manages that, we say, the health and safety, in regard to people. So there's no keep the targets away from the tree. You can leave the tree then as it is. Has some fantastic habitat up. You can see where it's failed. That heartwood decay is there. There's still a fair good crown on that tree. So that's a really interesting tree, actually. It's completely hollow. But it's fair play to Shane and the lads. It's a very simple way of managing that tree, and enables us to retain that tree in the condition it's in. So tree work to prevent structural failure. Again, it comes back to your management objectives. Do you want to prevent structural failure, first of all? So usually for me, in the sites that I'd be working in, yes. So we're trying to retain these trees for as long as we can, in as good a condition as we can, structurally at least. So we're looking to avoid structural failure of the root plate, the main stem, or large limbs, all of which could lead to total tree loss. Here's an ash tree in that's Newbridge again. Again, Shane Sutton involved with this. A fence is erected, keeps people away. This tree has been reduced, as you can see, but there's a good crown forming there. That tree, there's a lot of decay. I mean, there's a lot of decay in that tree, which kind of was going to lend itself to those larger limbs maybe failing. So the end weight needed to be reduced in order to stop that. So that's why that was reduced. So, the reduction work, along with something as simple as fencing, you can retain trees for a good long time. And I'll put this in just to show the kind of work that could be done. Now this isn't. I wouldn't consider this a veteran tree, but it's a compressed fork that has started to fail and started to open up. It's quite a lovely tree, but if left in that condition and its size, that tree was going to split down the middle. And if that split down the middle, then it was all going to have to come out. So we would have lost that tree totally. So the result is on the right-hand side. The reduction in the height and to take the weight off that lever arm. You know, if you hold a bag of sugar in your hand and stick your arm out, how hard that is. If you're not holding a bag of sugar, it's a lot easier. That's the basic principle on that. And we've also installed cable bracing in that tree as well, just to belt and braces job, because this is quite a high usage area. But that's, you know, that will need to be obviously the management of that would need to be maintained. It needs to be checked every so often. But if that's done, that tree can be retained definitely for now and possibly for a very, very long time. When we're talking about pruning, you know, when we're talking about pruning veteran trees, we stay away from this, you know, from Shigo and the standard target pruning, which, you know, you would apply to when you're generally pruning trees. So, you know, we're looking at leaving stumps, sometimes only taking very, you know, small kind of secateurs work, taking small growth off. And you see this tree on the right hand side, the state of its main stem. There's, you know, there's structurally that would not be able to, you know, support huge limbs. So that crown does need to be kept at a size where, you know, it doesn't collapse the whole system. And, you know, these trees this is how these trees were managed over time. They were pollarded, so they've grown used to having, you know, a couple of 20, 30 years growth, and then losing that growth and then starting again and losing that growth and starting again. And it's just that cycle had stopped, was interrupted for a long time. So it's just a great example of how trees can be brought back down brought back to where they were. And really what we're really doing, just mimicking nature, really. But when it comes to pruning, these, you know, these stumps are left. And the idea being, you know, there's more energy kind of saved and retained in the tree, and there's more area left for adventitious buds to produce leaf. And leaf, you know, is photosynthetic, produces energy to this tree, and managing trees is all about balance of energy. You know, we need to do enough to the tree to do what we need, you know, to maintain it, but we need to make sure it has enough leaf area, photosynthetic material to produce energy to keep it going. So that's the balance. But when dealing with vet trees, you know, it's the pruning is different to standard pruning. And here, I just threw this in. This is a branch that was cut. There's one cut here. You can see it was made with a saw, and one with a natural fracture. Now both, you can see the reaction to this. You can see there's the adventitious buds come into play and throw out new shoots. And you can see the amount of leaf that's come from those cuts. So if the tree is in a good condition, you know, you can manage a tree this way. But I just thought it was interesting to show that the two sort of a man-made cut and a natural sort of prune, and both of them have produced that kind of reactionary growth. Listen, that's it. Thanks for listening. I hope that was of interest. So if you have any questions, please send them in. Ask Brendan. Thank you.
Thank you, Cormac, for fascinating talk and some wonderful pictures. There's just one quick question I have here, that in the light of a lot of new planting of, hardwoods and so on, often surrounding older trees, maybe ones have their tops blown off and all, how do we prevent those young, more vigorous saplings from literally killing off the veteran trees by shading them out? This would be more in the rural setting, I suppose, than in actual parklands.
Yeah, well, look, ideally, if that was recognised, before these were planted, you would have your kind of protection area around this tree. But what happens a lot is this isn't realised till after the fact, and you'd often find this, and this would bring in haloing, which is a method of where, particularly, and it kind of came from, where trees or growth starts to affect the veteran tree in a negative way, and that's usually by shading, and you kind of need to, slowly thin that out. But ideally, you wouldn't do it in the first place. But if it's a case that these trees have already kind of established, and the veteran tree is being shaded out, you really need to, you're thinning that growth out with a view to eventually having it gone. But it's really, really important not to do that quickly. So it's a staged thin of the surrounding trees or shrubbery or whatever it is.
Okay, and just one other quick one. You mentioned that you talked about damage, root damage, and so on during development of retained trees or veteran trees. What can you do to ensure the trees which have been retained, maybe as part of planning permission or whatever, aren't damaged so badly that they just die off anyway after a few years? Because obviously they have to get to a certain age to become veterans in their own right. And if they're killed off in midlife, we'll never get them to veteran stage.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. Look, first of all, ideally that would be caught at the planning stage, and again, the appropriate rooting environment is retained and protected during the development. Now, if it's a case, and it usually is the case, that the development happens and it has encroached in on these trees, the effect will be seen either quite quickly or over time. You will get this dieback and sometimes lose the tree. But in that case, it's a case by case basis. You really have to assess the condition of the tree, and that's really important. That what condition the tree is in regard to its energy reserves, because what usually happens in the scenario you're talking about is the roots have been compromised, or the rooting area has been compromised, and therefore that is going to reflect in the tree, in the crown. So you have to assess it, Brendan, really, and see what can be done, if anything, to keep that tree in some shape or form. That may involve some reduction work, but you kind of want to avoid wounding these things as much as possible, especially the older they are, because the younger they are, the energy reserves will be there to back up some big kind of pruning work that you might have to do on them. But yeah, it really comes down to that rooting environment, and it's not so much the roots, but it's the soil, the environment, the actual soil itself, not to compact it, not to damage it in any way. And if the soil condition is right and the soil environment is right, and there's enough, the volume is there, the roots will do well, will live well in that, and that will be reflected in the tree. So it's that system, that kind of shoot root ratio, the crown to the roots, that's all interconnected. You damage one, you damage the other. So this is where the balance comes in, and you have to recognize what damage is done first of all, and recognize what possible remediation could be done without killing the tree.
Okay, thanks, Cormac. And the talk was so comprehensive that there were the only 2 questions that have popped up. So thanks very much for the talk. And
No, thanks for listening, and I hope everyone has a happy tree week.
Yes, happy tree week.
indeed.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll say goodbye then at this point. So good luck, everybody, and thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.